Matthew chapter 6. We're entering a new section of the Sermon on the Mount today. And I love this Sermon on the Mount. I hope you've been enjoying our time together. I'll just review what we did in the 5th chapter, if you don't recall. The 5th chapter of Matthew divides into the king, showing us the character of his followers. That's the first about 16 verses of chapter 5. The King Jesus shows us the character of the people who follow him. Then from verses 17 to the end of the 5th chapter, the King shows his own connection to the Word of God. You might remember he didn't come to destroy the law, but he actually came to help us understand it and interpret it properly. So we have the king's, the character of the king's followers. We have the king's connection to the Word of God. And then tonight, when you go into the 6th chapter, the king is going to show us the conversation of his followers, or the lifestyle, the behavior of those who follow him. So the 5th chapter, we have the character. Now the 6th chapter, we have the conversation, or the behavior of people who follow the Lord. And if you're in Matthew chapter 6, let me just section off the chapter for you. Like the first 4 verses of Matthew 6, he's going to show us how to give. How to give, verses 1 to 4. And then verses 5 to 13, how to pray. So how to give, how to pray. And then if you're still in the 6th chapter, verses 14 and 15, what are verses 14 and 15 about if you see them there? How to forgive. Right, so we have how to give, how to pray, how to forgive in verses 14 and 15. And then verse 16 to 18, anybody have a guess? How to fast, that's right. How to fast. Verses 19 to 24, a lot there about your treasures. So I'll say how to handle your finances. And then verses 25 to the end of the chapter, how not to worry, because the Lord takes care of the little birds of the air. How not to worry. So this is the conversation of the followers of the King Jesus. This is how they live their lives. This is how they pray, how they give, how they forgive, how they handle their finances, how they don't worry. Now, if you look over that list, which things jump out to you, or which do you think we should be talking more and more about as the days go on? What is it? Worry. How not to worry. Okay, good. Does anybody else have something jump out to them? Pray. How to pray. Good. Yeah, I don't know if we'll look at all 6 of these sections over the summer, but we have 6 really good sections in Matthew chapter 6, all about the disciplines, spiritual disciplines of those who follow the Lord. Now we're going to start in the first 4 verses. And what were the first 4 verses about? How to give. That's right. Let's read verses 1 to 4. Take heed that you do not your alms before men, to be seen of them. Otherwise you have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. Therefore, when thou doest thine alms, do not sound a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have the glory of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But when thou doest alms, let not thy left hand know what thy right hand doeth, that thine alms may be in secret. And thy Father which seeth in secret himself shall reward thee openly. Now, how do we know that this section is about giving? Does anybody see a phrase there that makes you think about giving? Charity, yes. Giving your alms, that's right. See that in verse 1, 2, and 3. When you do your alms, which is an old word for being big-hearted, open-handed, kind, hospitable, generous, righteous, loving acts towards other people, like giving money, lending a hand, helping a neighbor, offering food, cooking a meal, volunteering. All of those generous and charitable acts are almsgiving. Now, verse 1 says, when you do that, when you help your neighbor, or you give money, or you volunteer someplace, first you must take heed. And I wrote in my notes, you've got to be very careful. You have to give carefully. Now, how do you give? You give cautiously, or you take heed. And the idea is that you're on high alert against one of the biggest of sins when you give. Now, do you remember when Cain was about to be very angry with his brother Abel? In Genesis chapter 4, it says that sin lieth at the door. And that's the idea that sin was crouching behind the door, ready to pounce on Cain. Now, his sin was anger and murder, and it did pounce on him. When I give, when I go over to my neighbor, when I have an offering in church, a great big sin is hiding behind the door, ready to pounce on me. And I have to take heed, it says, and be very cautious or very careful, because if that sin pounces on me, it's going to ruin everything. And I might as well not even give. I have to avoid this sin, or I'll lose all eternal value in my gift. So give carefully, he says. Take heed. Now, what is that big sin? Well, it says in verse number 1, I have to take heed that I do not your alms before men to be seen of them. A big temptation that Satan will bring your way when you're giving or doing good is to do it to be seen of people. That means to do it in a public or a spectacular way, in a dazzling way that draws attention to your gift and to the giver, an eye-catching way. In fact, verse 2 talks about sounding a trumpet. And apparently, back in the Middle Ages, some beggars actually carried trumpets with them. And when a generous person would come by and give them a little gift, the beggar would blow a trumpet and draw attention to the giver. Look, this person just gave me a coin. Look, this person just gave me 5 coins. And they would blow the trumpet so everybody in the marketplace would know that something spectacular had happened, and they draw the attention by blowing the horn. Now that's fine for the beggar to do. No problem with a beggar saying, look, I just got a great gift and I'm so happy, let's all rejoice. But what some of the givers started to do was apparently they would only go to the beggars who had the horns. So imagine 15 beggars outside of the temple gates. Here's one lame man, there's a girl, there's a poor boy with some apples, and only one of them has a trumpet. 15 beggars, one has a trumpet. And the givers were tempted to only go and give to the beggar with a trumpet. Because when they gave to the beggar with a trumpet, he would make a big dazzling spectacle. Whereas if they just gave to the little boy with the apples or the little girl, nobody would know that they had just given a gift. And it went even deeper than this, because apparently some of the givers didn't bother whether the beggars had the trumpets or not, because the givers started to carry their own trumpets. So they could go to anybody, whether they had a trumpet or not, and the giver had a trumpet, and when they would give their gift, guess what they would do? Have you ever heard the phrase? They would toot or blow their own horn. That's right. They'd give their gift, and they would make sure that everybody knew what they were doing. They would draw attention to themselves. Now, have you ever seen that in your life? Have you ever seen someone do something good, generous, nice, but they made sure that everybody knew what they had done? Do you have any examples of that? How would that play out today? We don't have trumpets and beggars at the gates of the temple. How would people draw attention to themselves today?
See it on Facebook. They go and give a gift and have their picture taken presenting the money to somebody.
Oh yes, I have seen many people, they get gigantic checks, as big as a pew, and they make sure to call the media, and they make sure that the television cameras are there, and they post it online. Look at the amount of money, and they even write it in great big letters so everybody can see. $1,000, $10,000, $1 million we just gave to this organization. And they make sure that everybody is aware. They're sort of blowing their own horn, aren't they? Making sure that everybody is aware of their great big gift. Now look at the contrast in verse 2. When you do your alms, do not sound a trumpet before thee, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have the glory of men. And in verse number 3, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. And verse 4, that thine alms may be in secret. So actually, the best biblical way for me to give is to give secretly, quietly, so nobody actually knows what I've done. Now here's a good exercise for us. Somebody please tell me how verse number 16 of the 5th chapter works with verse number 4 of the 6th chapter. Chapter 5 verse 16 says, let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. And verse number 4 of the 6th chapter says, let thine alms be in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. So am I allowed to let people see the good that I do? Or am I not allowed to let the people see the good that I do? What do you think? Oh, there you go. It has to do with the motive, doesn't it? Because in the 16th verse, there must be a difference between doing good so that people will glorify my Father in heaven, and the verses that we're looking at in the 6th chapter, doing good so that, verse 1, I can be seen of them. So am I doing it so that my Father will be glorified in heaven, or am I doing it so that I will be seen of men? So there is a difference. If I'm doing something for the glory of God, others can see it and glorify him. If I'm doing something for my own glory, it is totally, totally wrong. So the issue is my motive. It's okay to let people see what we do if the purpose is the glory of God. It's not okay to let people see what we do if the purpose is the glory of self. So, do you ever want people to see what you do so that they will think that you're a nice person or a good, godly person? Why would somebody want others to notice the good that they do, if not to glorify God? What would that do for me? Why would I want people to glorify me? Oh, yes, pride. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel important to have this esteem, recognition, praise, high opinion, applause. It kind of strokes my pride and puffs me up and makes me think that I'm better than I am. So I have to be very careful. This is a great big sin that hides behind the door. He says, take heed. If you're going to give something, volunteer or bake a meal or whatever it might be, sing, be aware. There's this giant sin about to pounce on you that will make you want the glory of men and women and the praise of others. Now, giving will be rewarded. The word reward is mentioned several times there in verses 1 to 4. It will either be rewarded down here or it will be rewarded in heaven. Which do you think is more valuable? To have people praising me down here and applauding my voice or my gift, or to have the Lord rewarding me in heaven? Yeah, the Lord rewarding me in heaven is the more valuable. So that means that my gifts can have eternal value. We have some people in our church who know all about investments. And I guess they say that the longer term investments are the better ones. Well, let's do a little exercise here. Now, this is from Roger Babson. I've adapted it somewhat. It's called The Lifespan of $1. So tell me, please, if I had $1 and I put it into my lunch, now it wouldn't buy my whole lunch, but if I put it into my lunch, how long would that $1 last me? Yeah, a few hours, right? I'd have the benefits from it for a couple of hours maybe. And then it would be gone forever, and I'd need another $1, or $10 or $17. Okay, if I had $1 and I put it into my gas tank, how long would the benefits of that $1 last me? 18 seconds. Yeah, hardly a kilometer, right? I might get down to Patsy's house from here, I don't know. Okay, if I put $1 into my clothes, how long will they last me?
Couple of years, maybe.
Yeah, maybe a few seasons. I take great pride in the socks that I'm wearing, actually. I went to the Burlington Coat Factory in Bangor last August on my vacation, and I found 10 socks for $10. I was so excited. And I've worn those 10 socks pretty well every day since last August. And you know what? They're about ready for me to go back to the Burlington Coat Factory because the elastic in these ones is pretty well gone. They lasted me about the fall, winter, and spring. Now, if you put $1 into your vehicle, how long will it last? Oh, you might have that vehicle a year from now. Maybe 4 years from now, you might still have the benefit of putting that $1 into that vehicle. What about if you put $1 into a house? How long will that last? Well, you might be able to live there for a lifetime because you put that $1 and a lot of other dollars, but you put that $1 into your house. What if you put it into a mutual fund? How long will that last? I wrote until the Antichrist takes over the world economy. But if I privately and uneventfully put $1 into the Lord's work without praise or recognition, how long will that last? Eternally. There will be people seated in heaven 1,000,000 years from now that will have rewards and benefits because of what they did here on earth, quietly and secretly. It will last forever. And they will be reaping the benefits of not having anyone praise them, not having a horn to blow or a social media account to blow up. They just quietly, privately helped someone, not thinking of any return or reward. And 1,000,000 years from now, they'll be around God's throne, and whatever benefit they received when they got there, they will still have, because they served him so faithfully here on the earth. So what I do down here, as far as my giving, can be directly related to what I get up there. Now let's end by talking about hypocrisy in the church, because apparently this passage indicates that there's hypocrites that were going in and giving only to be seen of men, not to serve the Lord. So do you think that there's any hypocrites today in the church? Yeah. Now they're not here tonight. We can talk about them. It's fine. They all come on Sunday morning. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I think that there's still hypocrites in churches. And I think we all have to be very careful of hypocrisy. You know, I actually appreciate that we put things online, but there's a part of me that despises it. Because I don't like to think that everybody's watching me, what I'm doing. I don't even like to go to the door after a service and shake everybody's hands. I'd rather just slip away into the office, and I don't want to hear the good, bad, or indifferent. I don't want to hear that it was the best sermon they ever heard, or I don't want to hear that it was the worst sermon that they ever heard. I just want to do what the Lord has given me to do and then go away. So I don't really like that it lives on and people can continue to comment on it and send me little notes and say positive or negatively. I just want to serve God and leave all the results to him. Now there are benefits, of course, to shaking people's hands at the door. I get to see them for a few minutes. Hopefully they know that I care about them. It's nice that people can watch online. But there's always this big temptation whenever you do anything to say, oh, look at me, and let me blow my own horn over what I did. If we do anything like that, we lose all reward in heaven. Now, I'm going to end by telling you something good about charity. Do you know that the most charitable town in all of Canada is Miramichi, New Brunswick? According to Statistics Canada in December 2023, 1 in 6 Canadian tax filers claimed charitable donations on their tax form in 2021. The amount of givers is shrinking. Women are more likely to give than men, and the older are more likely to give than the younger in Canada. Those aged 24 and younger gave almost nothing in 2021. Now, they probably had very little to give either. But Canada's most charitable towns and cities, a few towns and cities across Canada stand out in terms of declared charitable giving. Miramichi, New Brunswick takes the top spot in Atlantic Canada. I think I said across Canada, in Atlantic Canada. Runners up are Fredericton, Charlottetown, and PEI. Now that sounds great, but the median donation was only $700. So that means half the people gave more than $700 and half the people gave less than $700. So it's not a huge amount that's being given, and it's mostly by older women than anybody else. So it really doesn't bode well for the church or community organizations. The less and less older people, especially women, that we have, who's going to be giving in 10 and 15 and 30 years? I hope they learn to be compassionate and generous towards their fellow man and to support the work of God, because Bible schools, camps, missions, and churches cannot operate unless we're all a lot more generous. Any questions or comments? All right, we'll say goodbye to everybody on